I'm Brandon. Ray can say hi.
Hi, I'm Ray.
And we just thought we would tell you guys about what our path to get to H3 in the Bay Area was like, and talk about all the different ways that you can get there, and talk about all the different stuff that we did along the way, and some things we might do differently if we could. Those are our two USPA numbers, in case you ever want to look us up and make sure we're still current USPA pilots. Essentially, we want to start with, kind of walking through the three different ratings leading up to the Hang 3. The reason to get the ratings, in case that anyone has not kind of thought about this, is essentially the Hang Gliding Association, USPA, wants to make sure that all of us can fly safely at all the sites. So the ratings are basically how they standardize all the different skills that you need to make sure that you fly at different sites. So each site has a minimum rating that you're allowed to fly there in order to make sure that you have all the skills that you need. And the reason that we want to emphasize getting to Hang 3 is, at Hang 1, you're basically still with your instructor every time. You're flying in a straight line. It's not very exciting. It's a stepping stone along the way. You're Hang 2, it's cool because you are basically out on your own. You can fly a lot of different places, but it's kind of a dangerous zone because you still need a sponsor to fly at many sites, and there's still a lot of places that you can't fly at all. And so often people will get kind of stuck in this Hang 2 limbo, trying to find ways to get out and fly, get the support that they need to go out and fly all these places. Because once you get to Hang 3, you are finally able to fly a lot more places. A lot of those places you can fly are very soarable. So once that happens, it opens up the floodgates for a lot more soaring hours, and lets you be independent. So just to illustrate that, this is like one of the first training flights captured by Takeo's camera on one of our first flying days. Essentially just flying in a straight line from the top of Ed Levin down to the bottom of the 50-foot hill. And you can see I was overcorrecting a couple times, but I picked a good one so that it wasn't one of the ones that I crashed. And so you want to go from that to something like this flight from when we were flying down at Andy Jackson, where we're able to catch thermals and soar. You can see here, this is the obviously sped up version of me riding a thermal up about 1,000 feet, which, it's just such an awesome experience to get to do. Ray, you want to go?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I think this kind of goes into, this is definitely more geared towards the beginners who are starting to think about doing this. And, I think it took Brandon and I on the order of 2.5 years to get here. So part of the motivation of this was like, well, okay, we didn't know very much going into this. If we were to do this again, how would we do it? Hopefully in a year, or maybe even less. And I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call that actually did that. So this might be obvious to you. We'll just talk a little bit about some of the first steps to get there. I think the first thing, I guess maybe I'll ask Brandon to hit to the next slide when appropriate. I think the first thing is to make sure that this is something that you want to do. I had kind of got it started just because I saw it on a flyer and I thought that was really cool. But I actually, it's hard to make the abstract decision to want to be a hang glider without ever experiencing the sensation. And when you're, I think that's like actually really important to help you through the motivation. Because if you don't actually know understand the sensation of what you're working towards, you know, there's going to be a lot of times when it's like really hard and you're lugging a bunch of equipment really early on a Sunday morning and you're trying to figure out, why am I doing this in the first place? And I kind of wish I did this sooner. I mean, Brandon did a tandem with Richard, who I think is on the call, and this is the video of it. And I actually never got to do it. It was, you know, much later that I felt like I understood what soaring was and things like that. But if you can afford it, you know, just before you even commit to being a hang glider, I think it's totally worth getting a tandem flight. I think one of the questions that I have for the audience really is like, you know, you guys probably know better than I do. Where are the best places for new folks to get tandem flights these days? But I do think it is an awesome, the best way to get that understanding of what it is that you're signing up for.
I agree. So the other thing, sorry, go ahead.
I agree with the tandem flights, and I will highly recommend Wind Sports for anybody that's down here. They're phenomenal because they can actually let you semi-launch and land at the same time. So like when I did tandems with Willie, you know, it was not advisable to even do that. You know, so you got the basic controls, which was fine too. But if anybody ever wants to go to Wind Sports, or you know, if you're ever looking for somebody that's asking for a tandem down there, I mean, you know, the instructor of course can grab something if something happens last minute, but the launch there is really simple and the landing's pretty simple. So he can actually let you get the feeling of launching the glider with having somebody behind you correcting it just in case. So you get the launch, you get the flying, and you get the landing. And my tandem flight with Andy was like 40 minutes. And you know, yeah, I mean, I flew like the whole time, but you know, he was there to like kind of, you know, most new pilots probably have the same problem too, is finding the lift or staying in it. When you have a seasoned pilot there telling you where to go and how to do it, you know, it was like it was the best experience. I think I got the most confident at flying just that one tandem with Andy. It's amazing.
That's down in LA, right?
Yeah.
We'll probably want to have some recommendations for folks that are a little bit closer to the Bay Area as well, but that's definitely I second that for folks that are down in SoCal. Clicking on maybe on the next.
Just if you want suggestions now or towards the end.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure, yeah.
So we can do tandems at Funston, but they can't be commercial. So pilots like Richard or Steve Rodriguez is a tandem rated pilot and instructor. So they don't take payment for doing tandems, but they, you know, can do introductory flights based on their schedule and availability. But that's where I had my first tandem, and my first hang gliding flight experience was a tandem at Funston in that manner. And it was awesome. So
are there good commercial providers? Because I feel like asking, you know, there's only going to be a small fraction of people that do tandems that I think that are going to actually commit to being a hang glider. And I think this is one of those areas where it probably is worth it to have like a go-to commercial tandem provider, right? Like it's hard to ask for favors constantly.
Yeah, and the only challenge with commercial at Funston is that our special use permit doesn't allow any sort of paid flight activity to happen there. So that's the only reason that it can't be a commercial tandem there, and which is a bit of a bummer because it's, you know, it's a very highly soarable site with ridge soaring because it's coastal. But in terms of you know, tandems elsewhere, it's, you know, it looks like Richard and Brandon, you guys are at Mission, so you're kind of subject more to the conditions.
Yeah, let me add another thing. Pat at Mission Soaring for a while used to do surface tow tandems, but aero tow tandems are also another potential option up here in the Bay Area, and that does happen occasionally. Especially when we put on clinics and the like. So it looks like we're going to try and get a few more people up on aerotow and getting like a few more like tow rated pilots and both the tow pilot and the tandem pilot. So that's something that is going to be in the works for the future. And it's not really, it really won't be commercial in the sense that it's like a day in day out type operation. It will happen like basically when it's available. And like for the aerotow clinic, we'll put the dates and times out.
Yeah, Okay.
Cool.
Well, it sounds like if somebody
yeah.
wanted.
Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I do want to. Maybe we should save the discussion for the end as well. I think that we probably do want to have an answer for, if somebody wanted to go on a tandem, in the next couple of weeks or this month or something, like what do we tell them, right? I think we want to have a good answer for that if possible. Maybe we don't have an answer. But yeah, why don't we roll through the slides and then we can I think there's a lot of good topics for discussion, and if we can make a note, I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about as a community of what we can provide to folks that are interested. I think the other one that is really important is I think I vastly underestimated community, but the analogy that I make a lot of analogies to skiing now, which I think kind of makes sense in some ways and some others. Like, yes, you fly on your own, but half of the joys is at the end of the day, or right before you go, you're chatting and you're hanging out with other people there and sharing your experiences. And so, that's free. You can do that before you start training. Brandon and I went up to Mission recently to just hang out and get a sense of that launch area. And that's an area that there a bunch of these launch sites are areas that you can hang out in without having to pay or anything like that. So that's probably worth doing just to get a better sense of, what that community feels like.
And you'll make friends by offering to drive their trucks back down so they don't have to do a retrieve.
Yeah, we had Delphina who did just that, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, when I did the tandem with Richard, I remember one of the things that was, almost as cool as doing the flight was just seeing everyone else just hopping off the mountain, flying around. I remember watching Soham just go jump off and fly with his friend who was doing a tandem and just kind of flying around together and, come back and land, go back out whenever they wanted to. Very, very cool.
Yeah, what's the next slide?
Yeah, so number 2 on our list here is to dedicate time to crank out each rating. So one thing that we definitely did wrong was we spread out our initial lessons and went, once a month, kind of didn't really try to, make sure that we were going out every weekend at least. And that meant that we had a lot of one step forward, one step back, slow progress. And so, we would recommend doing what I think a lot of pilots, a lot of, schools say to do, which is commit to go as often as you can. If you can, take multiple weekends back to back and go, if you can go during the week, that's even better, but at least go every day, every weekend, for, stretches of time that are long enough for you to develop a bunch of skills and practice them and remember them. So, do your hang 1 that way, get your hang 2 in a second, sprint, and, find a way to do that. I also put on here hang 3 spots, because I know a lot of people that I've talked to have struggled with getting the spot landings done. And, I think that getting those 3 in a row is hard enough. So you definitely need a lot of help. We were lucky to have Carl and Takeo helping drive us and observe us and all that.
We should define spots. So for folks who don't know what a spot is, one of your requirements for hang 3 is to be able to land in a 50-foot radius circle repeatedly 3 times in a row. And so that's difficult when you're starting, and it's definitely something worth practicing, because when you're off in a site where the landing zone isn't very big, you want to know that you can get to where you need to go and land in the right spot repeatedly and reliably, and not falling into trees or anything like that. I think one of the I definitely didn't take this seriously, if I had to be totally honest. I feel like everybody would tell you, if you don't do this, you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back constantly. And you know, I don't know if it was ego or something, but I feel like it was like, oh no, it'll be fine. Like, you know, maybe I'll come back in a month. Like, I'm gonna try my best, but I can't, you know, and I'm busy, I have a lot of work and this and that. And like, you know, while that's true, it ultimately costs you in the end, and either in terms of lesson time or in terms of training time, or money. You know, I wouldn't underestimate just that skill atrophy is a very real thing, and it just honestly feels nice to make steady linear progress and not constantly being taking steps backwards. So yeah, don't underestimate it. I feel like everybody ends up making this mistake sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard, especially in the beginning. You're getting up super early in the morning, driving down to 11, you know, to hike a glider up the hill, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and I think the way that we wrote it in the blog post was like, okay, maybe it's not necessarily reasonable to do this all the way from hang 1 to hang 3, but at least for any particular rating, it's, you know, you could probably crank it out in a couple months. So for your hang 1, focus, and for your hang 2, pick a time that you can focus, and similarly for your hang 3, which we'll talk about towards the end of the talk.
Yeah, and so that actually leads nicely into the number 3, which is wingmates will help you actually get your ass out there. They, you know, if Ray wanted to go, I'd have to go. Otherwise, you know, he would be there by himself, and, you know, vice versa. And so I think, you know, that it can often be a good motivation. You got other people who are in your cohort. You know, if any one of you wants to go, everyone else, you know, feels you know, pressured to as well, in a good way. And you know, we definitely would never have gotten here without you know, lots of really great mentorship from most of the folks on this call. But you know, like especially for that hang 2 to hang 3, you need a network of senior pilots, or like in particular, it's good to have like your go-to person who you can you know, ask, like, you know, for intros to sites or intros to other people who can give you an intro to a site. You know, that was how we flew at McClure for the first time. Was, you know, we found out about the fly-in days, and then, you know, we got introduced to Clark by Takeo, and then Clark, you know, helped us out. So, you know, it's as in everything else in life, you know, it's all who you know. Anything else you want to add, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, I was making that analogy to skiing earlier. I know there are probably plenty of people on this call who have done a lot of like solo trips. I have so much respect for you for doing that, because the analogy that I have is like, imagine, you know, hauling your ass out to Tahoe for a weekend by yourself just to try to train. It can get really lonely, and I don't know. I didn't have to do it, but I question sometimes whether or not I have the resolve to be able to go all the way to my hang 3, you know, on my own. I question whether or not I do. I'm glad I didn't have to. Honestly, it was just so much more enjoyable, so much more fun to take trips with friends and people that you know and people that you love hanging out with, and it just makes your experience immeasurably easier. So finding, you know, friends that you can go hang glide with, finding other people in the community to organize trips with, I would definitely, you know, recommend that.
Speaking of community, the next step is to join a community. And we explicitly kind of said online community because, you know, that's been the best way for us to find other people, organize trips, you know, find you know, learn from each other's, you know, experiences. You know, this is a place where you can post a video and say, hey, this felt weird, you know, what's going on? And you'll get like, you know, 50 posts of people saying, oh, you know, maybe you should think about this or that. You know, as you can see here, you can find where to buy gear that you need to buy. So we obviously suggest the 2 fledglings groups to start, but you can see all of my Facebook groups are hang gliding groups.
That's great.
Yeah, I think we're at a point now where I don't use Facebook unless it's for hang gliding. It's has real no other purpose for me.
Same.
And there's lots of them. So there's like you know, typically there's a Facebook group for each of the flying sites, and so those are usually a good place to go find out if there's a local pilot who can help you. Also the, you know, WhatsApp groups that we've got. I'm sure, I know there are others. I think some people are on Telegram, but you know, I think start with the people that you meet and see what they're using, and expand from there. Okay, so this one's got a lot more going on. When we started,
It's cool that you put it on the timeline.
Yeah, when we started, I think we all we were thinking about is the number of lessons and how much that was going to cost, and I didn't really include that in this cost analysis because that is something that happened at the beginning of your training. But the part that really kind of I didn't really think about is you know, all the other stuff that you buy, and the fact that it really is pretty front loaded in terms of buying your glider and your harness, and then there's like all these additional things that you can do to help you out. So you know, it just kind of, this is showing roughly the kind of when in your hang 1 to hang 2 to hang 3, you know, it seems, at least to us, like you know, you need some of this gear. So you know, typically sometime between your hang 1 and your hang 2, you will you know, decide, you know, I'm really going to do this. I want to start training on, you know, the actual glider I'm going to fly when I'm on my own. So before you get your hang 2, you'll typically want to get your own glider. Hopefully your instructor can help you find someone who's selling a glider used, or, you know, whatever you need. We've got some separate slides to talk about the harness and parachute a bit more later, so I'll get into that more later. Same with the Vario. The helmet, you know, we were advised to get, you know, a like, you know, like, wait, what kind of helmet are they? Downhill.
DOT rated.
Like both.
Yeah.
Yeah, DOT rated or motocross
downhill.
helmets is what we have. Yeah, or downhill. Things that can take a lot of shear.
Yeah, and there's a big debate about whether you want a thing around your chin or not, and you know, that's definitely for you to debate with everyone else. And
the ones that we don't have dedicated slides for, I can definitely talk to, like the GoPro and the Camelback. Like there was the Camelback, man, I really underestimated that, and I don't fly without a Camelback ever now, because I remember there was this one time at 11. It was so hot. And again, like, I don't know what it was. I just thought, you know, it's not a big deal. It's only a couple of hours. I'll probably be fine. You always have this like thought that you'll probably be fine. And then when you're up there and, you know, it's stressful and it's hot and you're sweating and you just spend a half an hour like setting up your glider in the hot, in like beating down sun. Like it's very subtle how like dehydration can affect your focus and your control. And, you know, there was a time, I mean, I landed safely, but, you know, there was distinctly a time I remember there was like, wow, that did not feel great. Like I was not performing at a level that I was remembered in my head. And I felt like I could directly attribute it to, you know, a lack of water. And so like I feel like that can save your life. And it's so simple, just keep water on you. The other one is the GoPro, which is like, you know, Takeo, I think, was the one that really drilled this in. And I think I underestimated in the beginning, but you want to record every single flight. There's no reason not to. Memory is so cheap, and you never know when you're going to screw up. And I guarantee you're going to screw up at some point that you don't predict. So the only way to be able to debrief with your instructor or your mentor on what happened, and sometimes the movements are so subtle. Sometimes it's just like you look down on the ground for a split second and you don't even remember that you did that. The video footage is going to be what tells you that. And so just get that early. There's no reason not to, and start recording every flight.
Let me add one more thing to that. The GoPro is not just for seeing what you did wrong, but it's also to help you reinforce when things go right, right? So it's like there's a positive reinforcement angle that a lot of people ignore. So when things go right and you keep that video clip and like, yeah, that's exactly how it was supposed to be done. It came out exactly the way I wanted it. That's also what that's for.
Yeah,
Also
the other
good
thing I
for
would add
recruiting
about
friends.
the GoPro footage. Oh, sorry, who's speaking? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying it's also good for recruiting friends, showing off your footage.
Oh yeah, narcissism.
Yeah, and
And you can make
and I actually
a cool
used my
montage like inside of
GoPro.
it.
Oh yeah. So the other thing that I've done is used it to get someone to like agree to sponsor me at a flying site. So when I asked Clark if he would sponsor me at McClure, even though I only had a couple 11 top flights. That's a different mountainside. I'd never flown besides my home site. And Clark didn't know me from, anyone else. And so, being able to show him like the flight from the top of Ed Levin, and, he was like, oh, okay, I see that you have done it. I see that you did it reasonably well. That gives, made him confident enough to, agree to help me out. I don't know if that's happened to anyone else.
I use it constantly, especially for people I don't know.
I used it.
And we also don't have a slide for truck because we that's the buying a 4x4 to get up to the top of mountains. It's definitely a thing that you eventually are going to need to do. We have not done it yet, so probably shouldn't be between hang 2 and hang 3, at least for us. But we rely on the kindness of all of the people on this call quite a lot for that. All right, let's go into each of our slides here. So harness and parachute. The advice that we got from everyone is basically your glider, you're going to upgrade, but your harness, if you get a good one, you're going to use for a long time. So it pays to, pick a good one, to make sure that it fits you really well, so that it's well balanced and you're not going to be, fighting against the harness. But there's two schools of thought about what type of harness you might want. The pod, shown Ray above being so happy in his brand new pod harness, and the cocoon. Anyone want to start a hot debate about pod versus cocoon?
Do we really want to have that fight on this call?
Yeah, I feel like it's like a Vim versus Emacs thing for all the tech people here.
Yeah.
It's a Chevy versus Ford. It's a bunch of let's
But
let's
I feel
defer
like
that to a later conversation, shall we?
when you get to that point, I'm sure there will be plenty. Anybody you ask will be opinionated and give you advice.
Yeah, it's like the Glock versus Beretta guys. I mean, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, I always just suggest that, I know like the instructors I work with, they've had like dozens of different harnesses to try, and it's say, hey, if you want to try a different harness, if we can see what we we have and get you suited. So this way, because I think a lot of that's it's a personal preference. So it's, if you can reach out to somebody to try different styles, even if it's from like the 300 footer or something like that, or 600 footer or whatever, that might just be what you need to figure out what you want. So this way, when you buy that harness, that's going to last you a long time. You'll know exactly what what you really want, what might work for you.
Yeah, the two things are fit and mission is really what it comes down to, right? And we can have opinions about body position here or there, but like a poor fitting harness is heavily detrimental to your physical performance, right? It's the part of the glider that you interface with. It would be like picking an airplane with where somebody put in a like a lawn chair, right? It may not work, right? So fit and whatever you're going to use it for, really the two overriding factors. But yeah, it's a pretty strongly debated topic, and I don't think we should get into it here.
We got a lot of other slides to go through. Yeah, thank you guys. the one thing that we really regretted not doing sooner is get a Vario app for our phone. So a variometer, Vario is just a thing that tells you if you're going up or you're going down. So it's super useful for learning how to find thermals, and you know, all the most pilots use that to soar and to help them find like thermals and find lift. But we're not really talking about that here. What you can do is you can get an app for your phone, iOS or Android, and it uses your phone's GPS and barometer to just log your flight. So it records a trace of your flight, and it means you get a automatic flight log at the end of it. So you can see all your flights. You don't have to keep track of what time did I take off, what time did I land, or what Ray and I always did was you know, take our GoPro videos and trim them down until the start and end of the flight, and that's how we knew what to put in our logbook. You know, with the app, you get that for free. Most of them will auto start when you start moving fast enough that it thinks you're flying, and stop when you stop moving that fast. And it's also, again, a great way to brag to people, because you can upload them to a site like Avery, and then it has like the 3D track of your flight, and it will, you know, you can animate it, you can see what it is, you can see where you were compared to other people, you can analyze it to see, yeah, oh, I see like over this ridge is where the best lift is. So you can watch here, this is me and Ray down flying from Crestline at Indy Jackson. So you can see Ray launched first and did some really good ridge soaring. And then I launched, and so you can just see, you know, there's a lot of lift here on the ridge.
Okay.
Anything else, Ray, you want to add there?
No, I think it's super useful. I mean, I used to go back to all my GoPro, like, because one of the things that we didn't mention was in order to get to any particular rating, you usually have to have some kind of like number of flights, track how many minutes or hours you've been flying. To get your Hank 3, you need 10 cumulative career hours. And I used to like meticulously go through all of my GoPro footage and kind of like look at the start and stop times, and then like count the minutes like down to the, you know, second of, you know, how many minutes I was in the air, to put this in my logbook to know whether or not how far I am for my 10 hours that I needed. And with, you know, with the Vario app, it's like automatic, right? It just gives you your logbook, and it automatically starts when it detects that you start flying, and you just stop it when you're done. And so it's just so much easier.
And it's such a low amount of investment in terms of money compared to everything else that, especially the free Android app. So the next thing to get would be a dedicated Vario. So the apps can use your phone's GPS and barometer, but the signal is pretty delayed. So it doesn't usually work very well as a Vario to tell you in this second, I'm going up. That means I'm in a thermal. You want that response time as low as possible. So you know, typically you'll want to get you know, dedicated hardware for that. You can either enhance your phone app with a Bluetooth Vario or USB, I guess, but and most of them are Bluetooth, so that you can mount it really close to your ear so you can hear it. And it's got a sensor that will be more sensitive and faster, and it will make the rising tones if you're going up and sinking tones if you're going down, the sound that every hang glider learns to hate when they're going through a lot of sync. You know, but it's still, you can still continue to use your phone as your way of tracking your flights. That's what Ray and I have both done. But you can also buy a whole dedicated Vario. Flytech is one of the main brands that has these, and they are, you know, really advanced, have all kinds of features that you might want. They're built specifically for flying. And I think one of the main advantages of a dedicated Vario is it's a lot less likely to die on you mid-flight by running out of battery than your 5-year-old Android phone or your the phone that you've been using to try to get in contact with people the whole day is also your flying phone, and so it runs out of battery. Anyone else want to make a pitch for Vario or favorites?
I think the app-based ones, so they're definitely not as reliable as a dedicated Vario, right? But they are a little bit more full featured. Like the Fly Me app, it actually even will have a thermal predictor. So if you run in through a line of lift, it'll actually show you a green arrow where you should go, right? It's kind of cheating in a lot of ways. It also shows a circle where the red side of the circle is where the lift is strongest and the green side is where it's the lowest. And so you just kind of keep adjusting your circle. They're a little easier to learn how to use at first. The dedicated Varios, there's definitely like a methodology and a switchology to them. But again, it's a self-contained device. It's dedicated for that purpose, and it's not going to crash or you're going to have something interrupt whatever it is that you're doing, right? The other one is that they last a whole lot longer on a pack of batteries than your phone does. So you can see my phone mount right there. That one has like a triple size battery, so it'll certainly last at least all day in that mode. But it gets pretty hot. It's vulnerable to direct sunlight, but it is a little bit more full featured.
That's excellent summary. Thanks. Ray, you want to take this one?
One other thing you can do with the dedicated Vario, like the 6030 you saw there, is it can give you speed to fly. You can put a glider puller in it, and when you're gliding, it'll tell you you're going too fast, you're going too slow. Typically, it'll tell you you're going too slow and you should go faster because you're probably in headwind and sink. But the dedicated Varios can be really useful with that.
And Brandon, I was going to say a Vario in general for the site or the rating between like hang 2 and hang 3. If you're scratching for hours, it really helps. There were a couple times with like Richard or with some other flyers at like Hat Creek or even McClure where you're in really light lift because you're flying in lighter conditions when you're kind of a new H2. And that Vario, I mean, even though, it might be cheating a little bit, it helps keep you in the air a little bit longer too. So you can actually get those hours instead of having, a half sledder on some of these trips or whatnot.
Totally. Yeah. I definitely should have put this further. Mid early H2 is when we both got ours. And, in terms of hours, especially, up to H2 is, 1 hour. And then this is, 9 hours. So, yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think it's a good feedback tool too. Just, you're hearing the beeps and ideally you get to a point where you can just feel the lift and you can feel it and turn into it before, in the fraction of a second before your Vario actually registers that you're about, you're starting to climb. So that's a good thing. The other thing I was going to mention though is with apps and different, sort of tech gadgets and stuff. For the newer pilots, it's important to minimize distractions as much as possible, I think. And it can be easy to get, you don't want to be, it's like when you're learning to drive, the driving instructors, they tell you don't want to just stare at the speedometer watching it go up.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, same thing with airplanes, right? It's like too many new pilots that get fixated on the instruments. Well, I don't because I don't fly an airplane with a lot of instruments. But like if you're flying a 172, that you get used to looking at the instruments, and the instruments lag the real situation. So like what Jess is talking about, where you can detect that something is happening and act on it before the Vario reacts, and then the Vario becomes confirmation of what you're actually feeling or seeing, and that's the mode you want to get into. And yeah, if you kind of, especially with apps, you want to take a like set it and forget it type attitude, where if something is starting to go wrong in flight, like it's not starting to work, it's not a critical function. So you got to learn to have that piece of software in your brain that throws away reliance on the device if all of a sudden it malfunctions, right? It's the same with the dedicated vario, but the chance of a dedicated vario falling out on you is pretty low.
Yeah, definitely. My first over-hour flight at Andy Jackson, my phone died midway through, and I was like, "Uh-oh, I don't know how to, tell how high I am." Oh wait, no, yes I do.
Yeah, I through Hang 3 and most of my way to almost Hang 4, haven't flown with a Vario. I flew with the Blue Fly Vario, so audio only. Stuck it next to my ear, which is a lot less distraction. I like that in the cockpit. It's kind of weird now that I have something that tells me my altitude, and I give up the ability to scratch as well, probably. But it is definitely nice to keep the distractions low as you're learning new things. And when it dies, I don't mind as much. It's not that much of a difference.
All right, let's move on to ham radio.
Yeah, so this is one of those things I think in your timeline, it's like after Hang 2, but before Hang 3, you probably want something like this. The basic summary is that your cell phone's not going to work in most of the places that you're flying. Not only that, you're not going to pull out your cell phone while you're flying. That's just dangerous. So this is both a way to communicate with other pilots while you're in the air, but also a way to reach out for emergencies. If something were to happen to go wrong, you're going to want a radio on you because you're not going to have cell phone reception. So the trick is that you do have to get a ham radio license, and that's a very easy thing to do. It took takes about a week to do the studying necessary to get there. We recommend, hamstudy.org, which was very nice in terms of just giving you a bunch of flashcards you can go through really quickly, and just drill, the way that it actually works is there's a fixed set of questions that they draw all the questions from. And so if you can just go through them and drill them into your memory, the test ends up being pretty easy. Of course, you're going to want to go back and understand actually how to operate the ham radio, actually how to program in the frequencies that you need and all these other things that the test isn't going to help you with. But for all intents and purposes, you should focus on getting the license first. Radios themselves are actually pretty cheap. I think I got mine for like $30. They might be a little bit more expensive now. There are nicer ones that cost hundreds of dollars. That's up to you. But you do want to have one just in case.
And I would say, even though you're not technically allowed to transmit without the license, in the emergency, it's better to have one than to not have help at a mountain site. So I wish I just bought the ham radio and just only used it for emergencies.
There's
even before I took the time.
There's two levels of utility. That is that you can certainly listen on the radio, which is useful. The other one is you can't transmit under normal circumstances, but you don't need a license to transmit in a case of an emergency. So if you to call for help, you don't need a license. So it actually is a very useful thing to have. You should have one, and you should also get the license.
And then you'll have a cool call sign that I don't remember. All right. So get your hours. We've got a bunch of different things in this section to kind of talk through. So we'll get into that. Well, I guess we'll start with talking about our Andy Jackson trip. So excuse us as we tell you our slides from our summer vacation. We went down to Andy Jackson for 2 weeks in June, and we are lucky enough to get to be able to work from wherever we can find an internet connection. So what we did was we got an Airbnb up in Crestline, which is in the mountains behind Andy Jackson, the flying site. You actually launch from Crestline, and over those 2 weeks, we both got over 7 hours. We flew every evening after work, but it's important to note that that range of those flights was very high. We had several days that were 15-minute flights. I think I impressed everyone by having the fastest slider from Crestline of the day. You know, it got down in like 10 minutes or something on one of the days. But then we also had almost 2-hour flights a different day. So it all depends. It's kind of typical California style. They'll have 1 week of one type of weather and another week of a different type of weather. And so we had one good week and one less good week. It was also really interesting to see how much more we learned by flying every day. Like, I feel like I finally learned how to know if I was in a thermal, how to, you know, how to feel the different kinds of lift, how to judge my landings. You know, it's the first time I'd flown that much back to back. So that was really awesome.
Yeah.
We also, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Feel free to
No,
finish.
go for it.
Oh, I figured it might be worth like just talking about why it's so hard for a Bay Area pilot to get 10 hours, just to build that intuition.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Fundamentally, like, you know, once you get to Hang 2, you know, you're probably flying off the top of Ed Levin, which is where you've trained down in Milpitas. And, you know, you're on like a reasonable day, you're flying 8 minutes at a time. 8 minutes at a time to get to 10 hours is painful. And we're not saying that there aren't ways to get there that are different than this. We just found that this was most effective for us for a number of reasons. The first of which is, like Brandon saying, the variance of the frequency of the length of flight can change a lot depending on the day. And so flying like a bunch of days is ultimately like, it's really hard to commit yourself to like driving 5 hours to go somewhere, and just for like a couple of days or a weekend, and then just find out that the weather isn't what you want it to be, because you can't control that. And I'm not saying that it's not possible to do a bunch of weekend trips to get there. Just be prepared to be disappointed sometimes, right? And for us, we found it to be the most effective to just commit, you know, a bunch of time there, because you can't control the weather, and sometimes it's going to be good days and sometimes it's not. There are other places to go as well beyond Andy Jackson. But I think one of the reasons why we liked it is because there's so much infrastructure there. Like, you're right in the heart of San Bernardino, very easy to get Airbnbs, very easy to get high-speed internet so you can work remotely if you're, you know, a remote worker. You know, there are a lot of other sites that are soarable, but, you know, you might be in the middle of nowhere or camping out in the wilderness, and it'd be more difficult to spend a prolonged or extended period of time there. And I think the other thing that's kind of nice about Andy Jackson is that there's like, because you're in a pretty established place with a lot of infrastructure, unlike a lot of other sites, you know, it has like a daily shuttle, which kind of changes the game, because otherwise you'd have to worry about how to retrieve your vehicle after you've flown down and things like that. There's just a number of reasons why we found it to be, you know, one of the best ways to rack up hours very quickly. And again, it's not the only way. It just happened to be what we felt like was one of the most efficient ways to get there quickly.
Yeah, and we have some slides about some of the other options for other mountain sites. So we can kind of talk through some of those other places that, you know, we've flown or that people recommend. I just wanted to throw in this my favorite picture from the trip was Ray and his dog Buttercup enjoying their treats. I also want to point out, so this is our, you know, only essentials. So we got, you know, Ray's Camelback, as he mentioned. We got his helmet, the Cali helmet, and we got the computer monitor for working remote, and of course his trusty companion Buttercup. And this is just, you know, one of the kind of cool flights that we had while we were there. You know, thermaling over the ridge, one of, you know, the probably hour-long flights. You know, here's me soaring with Jeremy, who's a Bay Area pilot that came and joined us down there when we were there, and, you know, me and him kind of chasing each other around in some really big, wide thermals that were easy to stay in, which is the only way I was able to stay in them at this point. So yeah, really, really gorgeous. Nice place to fly. So yeah, this is what Ray was just saying. Very soarable. you can get a sign off if you're Hang 2. You can go down there, work with one of the instructors down there, and if they see that you can fly safely, they will give you a sign off to basically fly either in the morning before 11 or in the evening after 5. And it's still quite soarable at 5, and so that was what we mostly did. Is we didn't really do the morning flights very much because we were there for 2 weeks, so we just did the evening flights. And yeah, shuttles. They had spaces in the storage units down at the LZ that let us, visiting pilots leave our gliders there. So that also saved us from having to load our gliders up onto our car and drive them up and down the road every day. So it was really great. And just to show not every day at Ajax is good. Not only is it sometimes not very thermic, but when we went down there for just a weekend, the Sunday, we thought, oh, we'll just get a flight from Crestline before we leave. And this is what we woke up to. You definitely can't launch from Crestline in that. So definitely worth going down for a longer time. Hat Creek is another really great option for if you don't want to make the trip all the way down to Andy Jackson. So Hat Creek is about a 4.5 hour drive from my house. I have not flown here yet, so thank you, Will, for sharing the video of your first flight here. And anyone who has flown Hat Creek want to talk about the advantages of it?
So this is where I got my majority of my hours working towards Hang 3. I went for 1 weekend with a group of instructors, flew twice and got 5 hours total. It's very rewarding glass off site in the late evenings. Like, it's very thermic midday. Even a lot of the locals don't fly there midday for how rowdy the air gets. But if you can get a group going, if you can get the expertise on launch, and they changed the site rules. So if you can get somebody to sponsor you as an H2, then you can have a really lovely evening flight there. It's not super reliable, so it still suffers the same thing you were talking about at Andy Jackson. Like, some days I've flown 20 minutes there. Other things?
I think every time I've tried to go, it's been on fire. So, definitely something to think about. Find when the fires are not happening and go.
Not that the fires ever bothered Bailey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Hat Creek is also, it can be a really good ridge soaring site too. The way that the airflow comes up, it's, even if it's not super thermic, or if the glass off isn't happening to be working, still really good ridge soaring. I've flown there and camped. You can camp right in the LZ. And it's a huge LZ, so I think that's an advantage too. There's just a giant field to land in with an easy glide to get to.
I'm not sure if we've defined LZ yet. I think that stands for landing zone.
Thanks.
Yep. The good part about Hat Creek is the glass off happens in the evening. So the idea is you go there and you play in the area. You go to Bernie Falls, you go play in the LZ, you go to the various campgrounds and all that, and then you come back in the evening to go fly, which makes it great for family members who are not pilots, especially if they happen to be kids. Is this like you can ride ATVs in the landing zone. 12-year-old even got his first driving lesson out there. But then there's also like hiking trails, there's a lake. I mean, it's actually a really, really nice outdoor place. It's not just about the flying. So yeah.
And it wasn't as far. I thought it was like over 5 hours, but when I checked just before this, it would have taken me only 4.5 hours to drive there from my place. So, and if
you skip the Bay Area
if you're
traffic.
in the East Bay, it's even faster. All right, let's see here. So McClure is another mountain site that is soarable. You can fly as a hang two, if you've got a sponsor, we're lucky enough to have folks who run these, hang two special days. So we just had one a couple of weeks ago where, the focus was to get hang twos out and flying and to make sure we had, the people to support us. So Terry and Clark have been really great at doing that for us. It's only 3 hours from my house, 2.5 if there's no traffic and I'm driving fast. The downside of McClure, and the reason that Ray and I slashed it from our list of options for getting our hang 3 hours was it can be soarable, but it requires you to know how to catch a thermal pretty quickly. So you don't get a lot of tries. You can see here in this flight, this was my soaring flight, one of my soaring flights that I've gotten more recently after going to Eddie Jackson and learning a lot about how to soar better. Now I was able to catch a thermal within those crucial, first minute before you sink out too low and you can't really catch a thermal anymore. That would be the main risk with flying McClure, is just that you have about a minute to catch a thermal before you're just getting set up for landing. Anyone else have any thoughts on McClure?
It is a significantly more remote site than Andy Jackson is. It's definitely out in the back hills in the mountains. You definitely need 4-wheel drive for the last part of the drive up to the top, and you do need to arrange your own retrieves. So, and also the landing zone requires some pretty solid skills.
Right, I forgot to mention, one of the nice things about Andy Jackson is you have the shuttles, and you also don't need 4-wheel drive to get to the top. And another option to consider is going towing in Tres Pinos with Pat at Mission Soaring Center. He got hanggliding.com, which is pretty good choice for him early on in the days of the internet, I'm sure. So towing, this is an example of towing. So what's happening here is you are getting pulled by a pulley that's out at the end of there, and there's a motor back here that's reeling in the rope. So it's pulling you forward, and so you fly up, and then eventually you release. You can see me here releasing. So you can see here I got up. I think that's right. I think I didn't get up to 2,000 feet above launch. I don't remember what it started at, but you can get up pretty high and fly around. This site can be really good in the winter. You pay per tow, but you can often get 10 minutes from one of these flights. If you're Richard, you can average 15 minutes per flight. But this is a really great site to fly in the winter when everything else is not flyable. So that's when Ray and I got into it. Was last winter, came out, flew there a bunch.
What it's really great for is you can fly multiple times without having to set up or break down your glider. That's another one. The other one is because it's if you basically tow up and then turn around and land, it's a great place to do the spot landings.
Yes. Yeah, you can do your spot landings there, and not have to lug it up a hill or turn on your glider multiple times.
Yep. The other good part about it is Tres Pinos also is a wonderful place to practice landings, because there's a variety of terrains. There's like slight downhill, there's steep downhill, still steep uphill. Not that you want to be landing on steep downhill, but steep uphill. Flat ground, landing crosswind, launching crosswind, and the training hills there are just luxurious compared to Ed Levin.
Right, big round training hills you can launch from no matter what direction the wind is, almost. And it's if anyone's still keeping track of how far it is from my house, I think it's like an hour and a half drive for me, which is 3 hours for Ray and his Tesla, but anyone else does fine. So yeah, just to wrap things up here, and we can go into questions. You know, these are the 6 kind of steps that we talked about in this talk. You know, get inspired, dedicate time to really focus on getting each of your ratings. Make sure you have a wingmate and mentors to help you. Have an online community. Buy all the gear that you need, and once you bought all the gear, it's just gas money and time that you're spending, and then you know, various ways to get your hours. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. This was our attempt at summarizing some of what we put in a blog post, so you can also read more. We had more than 6 things on our list of our blog post. A lot of other stuff we didn't have time to go over here, and you can read more or share it with your friends.
Outstanding.
Yeah, I think one of the things, just to reiterate, that's really cool about hang gliding is that it can be intimidating just how much work is involved in how much cost. You know, we kind of just threw all the cost there, but one of the things that is pretty amazing is that once you get past that, over that activation energy, well, then you're kind of golden, right? Like, you know, these sites don't charge very much. Maybe they're charging like a $10, you know, visitor pass to fly there as part of that club for a weekend. But otherwise, you're just planning trips and just going because you have all the gear. And so the operational expenses are like trivial or negligible. But there are some costs that you have to buy. You know, you have to buy the glider and you have to get your training, and that does take some time. But it's definitely worth it because now you have a hobby and a set of skills that you can cultivate and enjoy for the rest of your life.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, like most people, like the average maintenance on a glider is a cost of sidewires typically every year, which comes out to like anywhere from $150 to $200. If you're flying airplanes, you can blow easily that in 1 flight hour, right? In fact, you'll probably blow north of that in 1 flight hour. So just to maintain currency, like my club demands like at least an hour per month, right? And so if you're blowing $250 to $300 per flight hour and you need at least an hour a month, that you're talking like $3,600 a year minimum, right? So $180 for the National USPA membership plus $150 for sidewires. It's about $320 a year plus whatever club membership, which amounts, like they said, to $20 or $30 per year. So you're talking like, if you're really full up, you might be $500 or $600 out of pocket per year. It's a sure far cry from $3,600 just to do the minimum in airplanes.
And even counting the depreciation of the wing, like replacing the sail and then buying a new wing, it's still some few number of hundreds a year, assuming you can resist buying 5 gliders.
Resistance is futile. I think Will Dickey made a point that, and like probably Tim can attest to it, like the 3 of us, maybe plus Carl, we started on model airplanes, and when we started hang gliding, we saved money.
Actually, you know, the one I compare it to when people ask me about it is I'm a huge cyclist. I used to compete, and I have one bike that costs, you know, like the cost of 2 brand new gliders. so the cost, I look at it as a package to get into it. You know, it's relatively inexpensive and very comparable to most hobbies. I know I heard when I was down at Silmar last time flying, he was one of the instructors were talking. Andy was talking to a student, and he was saying that he could get somebody, you know, with no equipment and no ratings, no lessons, a full package, full lessons with ratings, gear, everything they'll need to fly for like 6,000 to 7,000. And that's everything: chute, harness, glider, wheels, vario, mounts, lessons, tests, everything. So yeah, I mean, of course you could probably do it cheaper, but if you really think about it, even that's not that bad for a hobby, especially when you look at the stuff that's going to last a long. You're talking at things that last a really long time. Harness, wing, it lasts. Vario, like I'm using a Vario that somebody let me borrow. It's probably like 15 years old. Still works great. The same thing with gliders. Like if you maintain them, everything lasts a long time.
Yeah, if you compare it to skiing again, right? There's no no fee to get the lift unless you're towing.
Yeah, I know. I went up flying in a 172 with a friend of mine. I just split gas, and it was like, I was like, when he asked me to split gas, I'm thinking, all right, yeah, maybe like 50, $75, and my split was like 175. And I was like, wow, that's my half. So yeah, I mean, you can go like Andy Jackson or wherever for like 20, $25, and you get a ride up, or get a buddy to shuttle, and then you're golden. Fly all day.
So I think we're lucky to have like a bunch of really experienced pilots, but also people on this call who have never flown before. I'm curious if any of the new folks have any questions. This is like an awesome opportunity to ask some really senior folks. Maybe not.
Okay, let me ask.
Hey, Raymond, I don't have any questions, but I'd add Silmar to your list of flying spots. Especially if you're heading down to Annie Jackson, it's on the way, it's closer. And I got a 2 hour and 33-minute flight there. There's good soaring opportunities there.
Yeah, and Silmar is just like Andy Jackson, a little more upscale as far as the landing zone. Like their landing zone is like country club. I mean, they got like fancy bathrooms, gazebo. They have like a telescope you can look up at the launch from down there. Nice grass. I mean, it's like, and then like if you go like Saturday nights in the summertime, they have like projection screen. They do movie nights in the landing zone after flying. They have barbecue grill, music. Like it's like you go there and you don't never want to leave. And I know now Andy's setting up to build a shade structure up on launch. So now I know somebody asked for the recent trip about like how many gliders. I guess it's just info to toss out there if we ever want to think about this again. But up on launch at Silmar at Kegel, I mean, last time I was there was like 8 to 10 hang gliders set up at one time. And then there's spaces like down lower that most people don't set up, but there's plenty of room down there. But I think most time paragliders are down there. So we were like 10 hang gliders and there was like a few paragliders up there. So plenty of room for a group. And they have the shuttle. It's $25. So they do the same thing. They have shuttles. And there's like Wind Sports has a shuttle, but then I think there's like one or two guys that have their rigs that they'll charge to get up. So it's always a way to get up to launch. And it's nice. So that's another option as well. I know just from my experiences at both, it seems Andy Jackson's definitely, I think, easier to soar. I could be wrong because I've only flown Silmar like 5 times. But yeah, you can definitely soar at Silmar, no problem. But it just seemed to me like as somebody new that might not be able to catch the thermals, it seemed like Andy Jackson was a little bit easier to stay up longer.
Yeah, you guys in Southern California have it way, way easy compared to here. It's really ugly here.
I have some question as a new person here. So I was wondering, the differences between like paragliding and hang gliding. How does it compare? Can anyone comment on that?
That's a can of worms. Actually,
See,
you know
Carl's
what?
probably a good one.
Yeah, Carl and Richard. I'm going to leave it to them.
Carl and Richard are two pilots who do both.
Well, people are constantly asking me which is better. Is hang gliding better or paragliding is better? And the answer I always give them is it depends on the day. Some days are hang gliding days. Some days are paragliding days. At 11, if it's blowing 35 out of the Northeast, that's a sailplane day. And so I think that paragliding is in some ways easier in the sense that the paragliders are easier to fly, they're easier to land. They can be a little trickier to launch, but on the other hand, failed launches are really not a thing in paragliding. A lot of times the canopy will come up, it'll go down, people get a few steps in, the canopy will collapse. It's just no big deal. Whereas hang gliding is the sort of thing where you take the first step, you're either going to fly or crash. But That said, hang gliders are easier to launch because they're already set up when you start the launch. Paragliders are laying on the ground when you start the launch. Hang gliders are much more tolerant of turbulence and do better in higher winds because they're much faster. But the logistics are worse because you need a rack on your car to carry them around. Hang glider, you can just kind of throw it in the back seat or in the trunk. And so they're
paraglider.
really kind of different animals in a way.
Okay, thank you. Is there some sort of statistics of crashes and injuries? I'm just wondering, I'm curious about this.
Well, the thing about statistics is that statistics will not harm you. Neither will statistics keep you safe. What you do as an individual is what determines how safe you are. And what keeps you safe is judgment. If your judgment is really good, you'll probably be pretty safe. If you're someone who tends to push the limits and leave no margin at all, and sometimes have less than no margin, maybe you should take up base diving, base jumping, or cave diving, or something like that. Not that those will be any safer. They're probably more dangerous, but my fellow pilots and I won't have to deal with the aftermath of something going wrong. So the real question is not how safe is it statistically. The real question is how safe are you? That's the real question. You can do, I mean, I've been flying hang gliders for almost 40 years and don't have anything to show for it outside of a few scrapes and bruises. Other people have flown a lot less time than that and with much worse results. And so the statistics don't really speak to what you're going to do as a pilot. It's really based on the judgment of the individual. And that's why I'm really reluctant to talk about the statistics.
I'll add something else. I'm actually fairly harsh with these kinds of questions, like if I run into them in the public. And the reason why is because we have such a risk-averse culture to begin with. The fact is this isn't risk-free. It is dangerous, and it doesn't matter which of the two types of flying you choose to take up. It is dangerous. There's a significant calculated risk that you have to take on. If you're worried about being safe to the point where like you don't want to accept any risk, that's what VR is for, right? So the reason why do we decide to take on a calculated risk where the cost of a mistake could be life or permanent disability, right? And that is because we get to experience things that no one else gets to. We get to see things that no one else gets to. We get to work in contexts that no one else gets to. Pretty much, and I'm pretty sure the other experienced pilots will agree with me. Like, we get to see things from the perspective that pretty much only birds get to see, right? No other human beings, not even people who fly other types of aircraft, get to see what we get to see and experience what we get to experience. So it's like, to me, like the safety question sort of detracts from the whole thing. And it's like, it's back to Carl's point about safety comes from the pilot. There's people that I could throw them into any platform, whether it be from paragliders to helicopters to sailplanes to airplanes to base jumping or wingsuiting, and they would be safe no matter what. And there are other people you can't trust them with a kick scooter, right?
The other thing that I like, I think it was Richard who said this, was like, if you compare this to like bicycling or like motorcycle, when you're motorcycling, you're close to danger all the time, because at any time you can be hit by a car or lose traction. When you're hang gliding, it's only just at the beginning and the end. Obviously, the end is always the end, one way or another. But it's only dangerous when you're near the ground.
But I ride my motorcycle to the hang gliding spot in Sylmar. So what is the statistics?
Living dangerously.
And I've learned, because I have like pretty much every hobby mentioned plus some, and I mean, the one thing that is a good takeaway is that like what Takeo said is, it's the person, and each hobby, even though they could be drastically different, even in difference in danger and risk level, it's how you go about it. And I find that the common denominator that I'm seeing, that I'm taking in all these hobbies, is doing it often, being committed, being focused. And you have to learn things for yourself instead of just following people. It's very easy to watch somebody, no matter how experienced they are. I mean, I learned it. I mean, one of my worst injuries, I suffered a brain injury training for a mountain bike race. It was an endurance ride. And it wasn't that the bicycle was dangerous. I had a moment where I just lost focus, and I was pushing too hard, and I just, all these factors came in. It was everything that could happen in any other sport: skiing, motorcycle riding, skateboarding, bicycle riding, whatever. It's just, and it's sticking to routine and doing things the same all the time, so you get this drilled into you all the time, and knowing yourself. And that's what will help keep you safe. And maybe, I think, because I agree about the statistics. You can look at statistics, but you can argue them either way. So I like to think of things of my own personal statistics. Am I safe when I drive my car? Because you'll see it. Most of the people that are out there splitting lanes and cutting you off, they're doing the same stuff. Like you said, you can give them a kick scooter and they'll probably do the same thing, and crash into somebody's house. So I think you have to know yourself. And if you're like one of those people that are a little bit on the dangerous side, and that, identify that now. And if you want to fly, you can, but you might have to say, you know what, I tend to be that dangerous person and like to leap before I can walk. And you might want to rethink on how you approach every time you fly. I think personally, that's why I pulled it back a lot for hang gliding, because my other hobbies, I tend to go full bore and don't care if I get hurt. I'll just get right back up and do it again. Yeah. And I just know that. So I purposely, whenever if I just, didn't even pay attention to the wind speed, I'll stop myself and say, I really need to step it back, and go back to training hill and punish myself almost, teach myself a lesson. And that's helped me with hang gliding. I feel myself.
It's another thing that a wingmate can be really good at.
Yeah.
Ray and I have many times held each other accountable for, hey, what you just did was pretty dangerous. Let's not do that again, kind of stuff.
Somebody you trust. Yeah, that's key. I found in this hobby. That's why I end up in Silmar too. I'm pretty happy. It's like, that's the other thing. Yeah, learn to make decisions. If you're somewhere and you don't think it's right, or it doesn't feel right what you're doing, then it probably isn't. Go back home, put it on paper. Why isn't it right? Evaluate it then. That's for me. That's why I made the move to Silmar. It was a good fit for me. Because it was easier for me to, and it wasn't the site. It was just I instantly met people that I trust. So when I go to Silmar and go flying, like, I could care less on my flight time. I know when I go there, I'm going to fly. And if the weather's right, I know I'm going to learn something. I know I'm in really good hands. If I do something out of line, somebody's going to let me know. And then on the flip side is when I do something right, people let you know too. I know, like, it's Silmar. I mean, Andy Jackson's a great place to fly. Don't get me wrong, but like when you land there, it's like the peanut gallery in the landing zone. There's people that like to go there and watch and hope that you will have like like a funny landing or something. It's just, that's from my perspective. But it's okay. It's all jokes. But I think as when you're new, you're kind of like, it's nice to hear something you've done right or something you've done wrong. I landed Andy Jackson once, and I just looked at somebody who was a paraglider instructor. I'm like, hey, how was that landing? The guy freaked out at me. What, are you trying to get a free lesson? I was like, no, it's just, I don't know.
Oh.
But so you
I
just
never had that.
Just
Yeah,
quickly,
it's always been like, everyone there is just like really, everywhere that I've flown, everyone's like super jazzed when you land. And
Yeah, that's been my experience at Andy Jackson too. I was just gonna add though, on the safety topic, the Bay Area fledglings, Takeo Masayo, helped to co-lead a whole talk on safety and risk management. So that's on the YouTube channel for Bay Area fledglings, and there are a lot of considerations to take into account for evaluating your own readiness to fly and the environment and a number of other factors. So we might want to link to that one when we post this one as well.
Okay. Let me just add one last thing. Sort of my question. This question was not about this, but I have really nothing to compare hang gliding to. I have no experience in real life where I can that's anything related. So it's not about statistics.
Do you have any kind of other flying experience?
I mean, in an airplane, but that's very
like,
different.
Like a jet airliner is what I mean, right? So
Yeah,
you've ridden in a jet airliner. How about a small airplane?
Yeah. So just and not just say statistics, but like how can you tell, whose advice do you trust and whose advice you don't trust? Things like that. Yeah.
The can of worms just got opened, and I think I'm going to hand this over to Carl.
You're going to be asking yourself that the whole time too, because you're going to get a lot of advice. But one statistic I heard on the safety side of things with hang gliding is, and I think it was a pagan book or somebody might have even told me, but 80% of parachutes are thrown because of failed aerobatics. 10% of the parachutes that are thrown are accidental, getting hooked on something. So that leaves 10% left that are, could be pilot error or some other issues. So if you don't do, wild aerobatics and you make sure your chute's not going to catch on anything, you can avoid like statistically 90% of the accidents out there anyway, and just make good choices. But it's pretty safe. I have like a moderate fear of heights and I still do it. I mean, it's not too bad.
Let me ask a pointed question. So I'm gonna point this question directly at you. That is if you were going to get into it, like what is attractive to you about it? And the thing is from there you kind of can branch off into what your limitations and what your mission is and what you're willing to put up with, and then that's kind of what determines what platform you pick, right? So you can start with that. And I don't want to get too far into this because maybe we can do this as a separate talk. But just if you can, give me a quick summary as to what you feel is attractive about this world to you.
I mean, I like the idea of it that it's sort of a very different experience that I have nothing to compare to. And
have you had flying dreams as a kid?
Not really, but like, I mean, I climbed, so it's kind of, that was already adventure when I started.
Okay. So
and even these sort of questions come up,
Okay.
But like, you can trust your equipment basically there, right?
Yeah.
And
so that actually will help you because it's like, you're used to living on that edge and you understand like risk and accepting risk and understanding like, so at this point it's more like, what can you support? But the joke between paragliders and hang gliders, the most common one is that they say that paragliders have all the advantages until you get into the air. So they have the advantages logistically and in terms of weight, in terms of learning and all this other stuff. But once you get in the air, that's where all your limitations really hit, right? But hang gliders are the opposite. They're we're kind of the ducks where we're not very graceful on the ground, right? But once we're in the air, we're really flying, right? So it's like, and like as we mentioned, Carl and Richard on the call do both, right? So I would encourage you to seek them both out and like kind of talk to them individually, right? And get their impressions, and that'll kind of guide you towards which platform. And you might end up doing both. However, I would strongly suggest this, and Carl, you can refute me or back me up on this, and that is don't try and do both at the same time. Nail down one before you do the other, right? Because you're in a similar environment and you're looking at the same site pictures, and it's getting the two confused in the moment can be very, very, very bad. So concentrate on one, nail it down, and then try and move on to the next skill. And like I said, there are many people who do both. Most of them go one direction. They're very long time hang glider pilots go to paragliding, but there are a few people that have come the other way too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I have a lot more questions, but it's getting late, so.
Okay, well, like I said.
Yeah, thanks, fun.
Yep.
I was just going to add in the feeling between the two. Hang gliding, of course, you're lying prone, so you really feel like Superman. You go pretty fast, and it's quite fun. With paragliding, you're sitting back, kind of like in a recliner, and you're watching all the hang gliders fly around you, so you're going pretty slow. But there are a lot of conveniences with it, and some people, it's worth it. So I don't know. That's kind of an analogy I've heard is hang gliding, you're flying around like Superman, and paragliding, you're kind of floating around in a recliner.
But yeah, feel free to seek out any one of us, we'll be happy to answer your questions in more detail. And like Brandon was saying, like if you don't know anything about it, come out and watch people fly. Where do you live?
I live in Berkeley.
You live in Berkeley. Okay. Yeah. So you're out in Brandon's neck of the woods, right? So yeah, like come out and fly and watch people fly, and like maybe you'll just get a gut feeling about what you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whether you want to do it, right? I
Yeah.
find that most people like they watch it, they go, oh man, this is for me. So that might be you. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
it helps any, I mean, when I first got into it, I took an intro lesson at the beach. I never thought in a million years I'd fly from a mountain. I like everybody else, like you just mentioned, I thought it looked kind of cool. I had the dream of actually getting a pilot's license. When I was younger, I did take a few lessons, but long story short, it turned out it wasn't going to be worth the money putting into it and the time. So I just gave up on it. I've always flown RC stuff, and I just always had that. I want to fly. I've flown in helicopters and small aircraft. And so I just, I didn't realize the training involved. And how I got into it was I found videos on YouTube from Ed Levin, and I go, wow, that's pretty neat. I would try that, getting off a couple feet off the ground. So I found the beach intro and I took it, and I still didn't think in a million years I would ever fly high. I just said, you know what, I want to take a lesson and just give it a shot. And I went into it saying, you know what, I'm just going to take a lesson by lesson. I'm going to learn something new and have fun with it and just see where it goes. I really didn't want to do anything more than that. And when I went to the training hill I learned on, which was 200 feet, the first day I went there, I thought I would never even fly off the top of that. But it didn't bother me. I just wanted to try something and learn something. And each lesson, like the questions you asked, I had the same ones. Who am I going to trust? What am I going to do? I just knew I had an instructor and I trusted him and I liked him. And every lesson, we would, spend like 6 to 8 hours. I got to really trust him and everything he said. And every lesson would answer one of those questions for me. And it was the first time I just built up my trust, and I felt like flying from the top of the hill, and I did it. And that first time I'm like, I don't know what I was worried about. I want to do this more. And I mean, there's still a lot of questions that I have that I'm still answering, but I think if like everybody's saying, like if you just show up and just watch, talk to people, maybe take a lesson, I think a lot of those questions will start getting answered for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask a question of Brandon and Raymond right now to change the subject completely. What was the hardest thing you went through going from the H2 to H3?
I think it was the initial slump after we were done doing lessons and didn't really know what to do or who to go to or how to connect with anyone. I mean, essentially it was somehow we hooked ourselves up with Takeo and realized we could just he would get us out there flying and help us do stuff that we couldn't do on our own yet. And before that, it was like completely impossible. Or Ray and I were like, we could maybe go out on our own to like a 50-foot hill, but we're comfortable doing anything else on our own.
It's hard to remember now, but yeah, I totally agree with that. I remember, okay, we were just towards the tail end of our Hang 2, and I get that it's a little bit different because Robert stopped teaching around that time. But even still, like, let's say, he was still around, it was like, I have enough skills to go with an instructor, but definitely did not feel comfortable jumping off, say, like the top of Ed Levin by myself, or even with just Brandon. Like, I didn't have enough confidence in my skills yet. I didn't know that many people, right? And there were still a bunch of things that I felt like I needed more practice with. So I guess if Robert was still teaching, I guess I could have asked for more lessons, but how scalable is that? Like, thinking about how many times we've gone flying since we've taken lessons that we paid for, it's a lot, right? Like, and so at that time, Takeo was there to teach us our first couple of lessons, but at that time, like we actually didn't know him that well, right? Besides just being, someone that we had met through our first couple of classes. So I think it felt like a limbo that like we just didn't know how to get out of. We could have found another instructor. We were thinking through all the considerations. We could have found another instructor paid for more lessons till we got more comfortable. We could have broadcast out to a Facebook group of total strangers that we didn't know anybody of, which is intimidating, but maybe that would have panned out. Or we ended up reaching out to Takeo, and that just ended up being lucky that he was willing to mentor us. But if that didn't exist, like, I don't know, it's just intimidating, right? Because you just don't. I understand where Macron's coming from, because now that we're all there, it's like so obvious. Like, well, we have friends and we have people in the community and we have all these other things. But if you don't even have a sense of like what that path is supposed to look like. You don't know who to ask. It's lonely, right? It's scary. And I mean, one of the things that Brandon and I have been thinking about is, well, what could we as a community do better to try to support people who, because I'm fresh enough that I can still empathize with a lot of that. To the extent that Takeo is willing to mentor every single H2 that comes out of the Bay Area, that's like a blessing. But, maybe we should have a more like scalable mentorship program, right? Where H3s or H4s are willing to kind of play that role and just check in on you. And some of it's just emotional support that, like, I understand where you are and I understand what you need to do. And maybe I'll hook you up with a friend of mine who can, give you some advice on this or that. But that was, incredibly valuable.
That's sort
I
of
think
the goal
having someone that is your default go-to. Oh, sorry to
Yeah.
I mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Having someone who's your go-to, who essentially there's a whole community, right? But we figured out by luck that we could go to Takeo and he would tell us what are the options, where can you go? I'm free on this day, I'll come help you. Even if like I was thinking, Ray and I were talking about what do we think we could do as mentors? Like we can't be as good as Takeo, but because I want to do stuff on my weekends.
I want to be crystal clear.
So I can't always help.
I expect you to surpass me. Okay.
Well, so what I was thinking is, you at least want someone who you can text or call and say like, hey, I want to do something, or who will check in with you and be like, hey, I haven't seen you out in a while. Like, why don't you come out and do this? We're doing that. Or, hey, a bunch of us are going to McClure. Just like someone who's looking out for you and is like going to get you out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why we were thinking like a more formal is probably not the more structured like mentorship program might make sense, right? Just to kind of like establish the intention that this is kind of what I want to do. I think, Takeo had the foresight to create this Delta WhatsApp group, and that ended up being so valuable. It seemed like nothing at that time, but like being able to just reach out to, Jess or Richard or Takeo for questions on this or that, like, or to schedule trips. Like we could post out to a group of 100+ people in fledglings. And we do when we organize trips and we organize things, but it's not every conversation, every little minute conversation that we're going to like post out to, especially if we're brand new, post out to like a continually growing group of hundreds of people. Right. And so setting up smaller groups of people that, might make sense.
I think that's the route that we've taken in that sense, and it's like there hasn't been any sort of formal effort to organize around any particular ideas. We kind of allow people to coalesce, or we've encouraged people, not allowed. We've encouraged people to find whatever group seems to work for them, whether it's geographical or like some other interest, or like to me, like a perfect example is the Abhishek Soham and Andy Balk combination, where like those three guys are like out getting after it in the tough conditions at the Owens and at Slide and the like, right? And so like their flying goals seem to align. You have the ACPs like John Taylor and Chris Valley and all, and those guys have been buddies forever. But as far as like the mentorship and the guidance goes, like I had the same thing that you guys did in the form of Mark Lillidahl and Carl and Clark and all that, right? So like Mark Lillidahl and I, like the first time we met, we butted heads. Like I'm like, oh, wow, like he was frankly like rude isn't the right word. He was abrasive with me, right? And eventually, like, I sort of was able to get in good with him, and he really showed me everything, right? So in a sense, it's like everything that I got, or as much as I can give you, is what I got from him, right? There's no way I can give you everything he gave me. So it's like I'm just passing down what I received, and you'll have the opportunity to pass down what you guys receive too, right? That's just the way this works. And so when you're talking about creating cohesive community or rebuilding a cohesive community, like that is really the bottom line, right? There's a line in one of my favorite books that says that the basis of all morality is duty, right? So it's like in my case, I received much more than I gave, and so now I have this duty to do the same, right? And I'm not saying that you guys have the duty to do the same, but maybe you feel like that's the case, and so you're going to act upon it. And the people that you do that for will do the same for the people that come after them, right? That's really what it comes down to. Now, when you're talking about scalability, initially it was Robert's 2018 class. They just put this together to organize trips and the like, and it's expanded and expanded and expanded. And so now we got Masayo, we got Jess, we got Richard, we got Clark, we got Terry. We have all these great people, and they're all taking a small piece of it and making something of it. So it's like whatever you choose to pick out in order to make the community better. It's like, okay, well, if you see a hole, fill it. You don't need to ask anybody's permission. And you don't need to wait for instructions or anything else. It's like, okay, well, you see something that you can do something about, and the two of you guys are right. You're on this talk at a minimum, and you're involved in a bunch of other projects in the community. But this is for everybody. It's like if you see a piece of something that you can do something about, then do something about it, right? It's like I feel like from hang gliding, I've gotten much more than I've been able to give, and that feeling continues to go forward. And this is the case pretty much everywhere I go. It's like everything I got in the military, I got more than I was called upon to give. So it's like, if you want to improve your community, just take on that small piece and do something with it, like you guys are, right? So whether it's recruiting or putting together systems or organizing people and the like. So actually, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. The two of you are excellent, additions to the community. I know you're helping bring along Scarlett, so that's actually been a really, really great thing. And then you're bringing along a bunch of other people. And so, the best thing is for all that to continue.
I want to put an additional perspective on this, is that, you've just got your H3, and congratulations for getting through all of the stuff you have to get through to get there. And you're thinking, well, I don't know nearly as much as these more experienced pilots and all of that. But what I want to tell you is, think about somebody who's just maybe flown a couple of flights off the top of Ed Levin, and those are their highest, longest flights so far. You guys have flown Crestline, Funston, a bunch of places they've never even been. And so you have a lot of valuable insights that you could tell them. The other thing is that your perspective on what that's like is a lot closer than my perspective would be. I mean, it's really difficult for me to imagine what it would be like to fly Funston for the first time. That was so long ago that I can't even remember it. But for you, it's pretty fresh in your memory, so that you could have a much better and closer perspective to somebody who's getting to the point where they're going to do that. And that's the perspective to keep in mind. You've got a lot of valuable things that you could tell people that are, 6 months, a year, 2 years behind you. And so
Yeah.
Don't hesitate to go ahead and tell them stuff. The fact that, you've never flown in a comp and you've never flown the Owens Valley, that's totally irrelevant. The fact that you've been through what they're going through really recently, that's what's really important and relevant.
Oh, I think I totally agree. And I think that's kind of why I keep bringing up this idea of a mentorship program is part of it is a matchmaking problem. Like all the people I know are the people that helped me and the people that I've been flying with and this and that. And I'm not meeting those brand new H1 pilots, those brand new H2 pilots. I guess I could, one of the things I really appreciate about you, Carl, and thank you so much for taking us up on those, those rack runs. It's like, yeah, you seem to take a very proactive stance to be there and be available. But, I think unless I'm like just hanging out in 11 looking for when lessons are happening, I don't necessarily have that opportunity to meet pilots that happen to be training on any given day. And I want to, right? Like, I think there's a lot of energy here to want to help, not just myself and Brandon, but I'm sure there's other, fresh H3s as well. And I think it's fundamentally just a matchmaking problem or like a networking problem. Like, how do you even meet new pilots? And so, yeah, I think there can be stuff to be improved there.
I think the thing is that we were sort of coming right out of the part of the pandemic, so there was a lot of, and you guys are coming of age like sort of in the middle of it. But we're going to start having more events. One of the things that we've proposed is have a Hang 4 spot landing day or spot landing contest where the Hang 2s and 3s drive for the Hang 4s, right? And they judge us on how we're doing, right? And that'll be an opportunity. But the other one is like Micron is he doesn't have, he's a zero in the sense that he's never flown before and has never really been exposed to it, right? So a good example would be Micron. We're doing rack runs, so we're taking gliders up on a rack up to the 300-foot hill so that people can accomplish their spot landings this coming Saturday, right? So like if you wanted to come out and watch, that would be an ideal day, right? And if you sign a park waiver, we can throw you right in the mix. You can ride with us in the car if you need to, right? And you can actually get like a real ground level look at how all this stuff works. So it's stuff like that, right? Like just including people. The other day we had a Diablo orientation, right? So Diablo is Hang 4 only, right? But did we have Hang 3 show up? Yeah, sure. And they were showing up to drive for us and just kind of get a preview and be included, right? And so I think if we do that with the lower ratings, we can kind of build that pipeline. A mentorship program, I think, is a fantastic idea. In fact, it's actually in the USPA bylaws, but they haven't done much with it, right? I think we have a tremendous opportunity because we have this huge pulse of Hang 3s that have come through this year, right? To now all of a sudden like start pairing them up with people that are just they're juniors to be a good senpai for their juniors, right? I think like part of it's incumbent of us to just kind of get in with the instructors and meet their new people and see who's training and right. And like we have I'm familiar with people that, well, like John Simpson, right? He's always posting videos. I know all his people. I know most of Mike Briganti's new students, and I know most of the Berkeley students too, right? But that's because I'm always out there. So if it would be helpful, we can take steps to like suggest maybe pair offs and hey, like this guy or this person is the right energy level and the right temperament. Maybe you'll get something out of being around them, right? So maybe we can start out sort of a bottom up. But I think that all these things are good ideas. I think we should work on them. I think the Hang 2 hole, I think we're slowly starting to beat that down, right? Because logistically, we're starting to the point where we kind of solved a lot of those problems. Now the next step is the Hang 1 to 2 and then 0 to 1, right?
Yeah, I think there's other things around like infrastructure that could be useful. Like, Brandon and I are a little bit lucky in the sense that we're, a little bit older and have a little bit more free time. And we're happy to help Scarlett when she needs help. But she's also lucky in the sense that she's a local. Like she can store her glider at her parents' place, and not everybody has that. Macron's a friend, so I understand that. Like he just moved here from Amsterdam. Like he's brand new to the area. He doesn't have family here to store a glider at and stuff like that. And so, I think there are things that we can do, whether it's I think Robert had that communal storage for a while, and that was immensely helpful for me and Brandon at that time. I don't know if anyone's still doing things like that, but to the extent that there are,
the Berkeley Club has their shared infrastructure that is really helpful. And that was the thing that was great about Andy Jackson is you can just leave your glider in the storage unit there. Funston has that, but you only can take advantage of that if you're a Hang 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've tried it at 11 to get a storage unit and we can't, but like
I think if it
that
really
kind of
becomes
stuff
a
is
problem,
helpful.
we'll be able to solve it. I think Spencer actually has some limited storage. We have some very limited storage. It's like if it comes down to it and the chips are down, we'll figure it out. Like that's the one thing we're not short on as smart people.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Great discussion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.